The world was watching. When Michael Foster, a seasoned wildlife conservationist, entered the icy, rushing waters of Zambia's Luangwa River, no one could have predicted what would unfold. What was supposed to be just another day of routine fieldwork soon became a dramatic and heart-stopping rescue, and a story that would make headlines across the globe. But when the lion Michael saved from drowning did something utterly unexpected, the world watched in awe. Michael never imagined that his name would be tied to such a legendary moment. Known for his years of dedicated work at the Mfu Lodge in South Luangwa National Park, he'd spent countless hours documenting the behavior of lions in the wild. With a deep understanding of their territory, movements, and social structures, he thought he knew everything about these powerful creatures. But that all changed on one fateful morning in February 2023, when he encountered a lion in peril. The rain had been relentless, swelling the river's banks and transforming much of the savanna into a dangerous, temporary wetland. Animals that would typically roam freely were now trapped, stranded on islands of dry land, isolated from their pride and food sources. Michael, along with his colleague Joseph Bander, had set out to assess the effects of the flood on wildlife movement. What began as a routine trip to monitor the river's water levels quickly escalated into an encounter that neither man could have foreseen. As the boat glided through the swollen river, Joseph suddenly pointed toward a commotion in the water. Through his binoculars, Michael spotted the unmistakable shape of a lion, struggling against the current. It was clear. The young male lion was drowning, and time was running out. What happened next would defy logic and expectations. It all began like any other day of routine monitoring. Michael and Joseph were navigating the swollen Luangwa River, keeping an eye on the seasonal floods that had turned the surrounding wilderness into a treacherous wetland. They were headed towards a section of the park known as Hippo Bend, a spot that had become notorious for its powerful current. It was dangerous, yes, but this was part of their job. They were used to the river's unpredictable nature. But what they weren't expecting was the sight that lay ahead of them. Joseph, ever the experienced ranger, was the first to notice it. He pointed toward the water, his voice steady but urgent. "Mike, look there." Through his binoculars, Michael could see the unmistakable silhouette of a lion, struggling against the furious current. The animal's powerful limbs were thrashing in the water, each stroke weakening, each movement growing more desperate. Michael's heart sank. It wasn't just any lion. It was a young male, likely just entering his prime, from a pride they had been monitoring for years. The lion was caught in the strongest part of the river, far from any dry land. It was a fight for survival. Despite their natural ability to swim, lions generally avoid deep water, and this one was clearly not in control. Michael knew instinctively that if they didn't intervene, the lion would be swept away by the powerful current. "This lion is going to drown if we don't do something," Michael muttered under his breath. Joseph's gaze was skeptical. "Mike, that's a lion, not a person." "I know," Michael replied, already reaching for the rescue equipment. "But it's still alive. We can't just leave it." There was no time for hesitation. They were far enough from the shore that the lion was out of reach for a typical rescue. Michael knew this wasn't just another wildlife incident. The flood had changed everything, and he couldn't simply watch a creature he knew so well drown because nature had been altered by human actions upstream. It was up to them to help. "Steer the boat closer," Michael ordered Joseph, already stripping off his jacket and shoes. Joseph complied, his hands steady on the wheel of the boat as he navigated through the wild current. The water was cold, the rush of it louder now that they were drawing closer. Michael secured a rope around his waist and handed the other end to Joseph. "Get us alongside him, and be ready to pull us both in." Without waiting for a response, Michael leaped into the water, the cold striking him immediately. His muscles screamed with the sudden shock of the river's current, but he had no choice. The lion's life depended on this. The first few strokes in the water felt like they were dragging him under. The current was stronger than Michael had anticipated, its icy grip pulling at him with every movement. But he had no time to waste. He kept his eyes locked on the lion, its head bobbing up and down as it struggled to stay afloat. Each time it dipped below the water, Michael's heart skipped a beat. The lion was weak, exhausted from its fight against the river's current. Michael could see the animal's amber eyes locked onto him, filled with what could only be described as a mixture of fear and a glimmer of hope. Michael couldn't afford to be afraid. He had to keep calm, both for his own safety and to avoid spooking the lion any further. As Michael swam toward the lion, he spoke softly, trying to soothe the animal. "It's okay," he whispered, though he knew the lion couldn't understand his words. But animals, especially lions, respond to tone and presence. He needed to project calm confidence, not fear. If he showed fear, the lion might react defensively. When Michael reached the lion, he could feel its enormous weight as he tried to steady it. The lion didn't lash out, as Michael had expected. Instead, it seemed too exhausted to do anything but let Michael help it stay afloat. He gently placed his hands under the lion's chest, supporting it as best as he could. The boat was close now, but the current made it impossible to pull the lion aboard without capsizing. The sandbar was their only hope. Joseph had pointed it out from the boat. A small patch of dry land, about 30 yards downstream, would serve as their only refuge from the river. Michael nodded and began guiding the lion toward the sandbar, using the river's flow to their advantage rather than fighting it. It wasn't easy. The lion's wet, waterlogged coat made it heavier, and every stroke of the current pushed them further downstream. Michael's arms burned with exhaustion, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He felt the lion's weight pressing against him as they struggled toward the sandbar. For every moment of progress, there was another moment where it felt like they would be swept away. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Michael struggled against the river's force. But finally, his feet touched the silted bottom of the sandbar, and he could feel the lion's paws scrabbling beneath him as it sensed the solid ground. With a final effort, Michael pulled the lion onto the island. His own body collapsed beside it, exhausted, his lungs gasping for air. For a moment there was silence. Michael lay beside the lion, both of them side by side on the small patch of earth, just breathing. The lion's chest rose and fell rapidly, its ribs expanding as it recovered from the near drowning. Michael kept a respectful distance, understanding the dangers still present in the situation. The lion could recover, but it was still a wild animal, and one that could turn on him in an instant. As Michael and the lion rested on the sandbar, something strange began to happen. The lion, though still weakened and exhausted, made no move to attack. It simply lay there, breathing heavily, its golden coat still dripping with water. It seemed to acknowledge Michael's presence, not with aggression but with a kind of calmness that Michael had never expected from such a powerful predator. Joseph called out from the boat, urging Michael to move before the lion regained enough strength to become dangerous. "Mike, come on, let's go. You've done what you could. Let's not press our luck." Michael understood the urgency in Joseph's voice. The lion was still a predator, and even though it had been rescued, the natural instincts were still there. Slowly, Michael began backing toward the boat, his eyes on the lion, carefully moving to avoid triggering any aggressive behavior. Just as he thought he was far enough, the lion did something that stopped him in his tracks. It rose unsteadily to its feet, shaking the water from its fur like an oversized house cat. It looked directly at Michael, its gaze intense and unblinking, and then, shockingly, it took a step toward him. Joseph shouted, reaching for the tranquilizer rifle, but Michael held up his hand to stop him. The lion's body language wasn't aggressive. There were no bared teeth or flattened ears, no raised hackles. It was as if the lion was approaching him, not as a predator closing in on prey, but as something else entirely. The lion took another step, and then another, moving with deliberate calm. It was clear it wasn't afraid of Michael, nor was it acting out of aggression. For a moment, Michael stood there, heart racing, not knowing what to do. Instinct screamed at him to run, to get to safety, but somehow he couldn't bring himself to move. This was a moment unlike any other. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lion did something truly astonishing. It lifted its right paw and extended it toward Michael, almost as if offering a handshake. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This wasn't just an animal recognizing a person. It was something more, something deep, instinctual, and almost human in its gesture. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Michael extended his own hand. Time seemed to stand still as the lion's massive paw made contact with Michael's outstretched palm. The rough pads of the lion's paw pressed against his skin, claws mercifully retracted. For 3 heartbeats, they stood there, connected in a moment that defied logic and explanation. The lion then withdrew its paw, nodding its head slightly as if to acknowledge the connection before turning away and walking toward the edge of the sandbar. Michael stood frozen, his mind racing to process what had just happened. Joseph, still in the boat, was equally stunned, his voice barely a whisper. "Did you just see that? He just shook your hand." As the lion slowly walked away, Michael remained standing, watching it disappear into the tall grass. The profound connection they had just shared left him speechless. What did it mean? Was it a fluke, a moment of wild instinct or understanding? Or was there something deeper at play here? The lion sat on the far edge of the sandbar, facing the riverbank, as if waiting for something. Michael felt a wave of uncertainty. Could he really leave it now? Would it come back at him once it regained its strength? Yet, there was an undeniable sense of trust in the air, one that seemed to have crossed all boundaries of species and nature. Joseph was watching carefully from the boat, still holding the tranquilizer rifle, but his earlier fear seemed to have dissipated. He too had witnessed something remarkable. After what felt like an eternity, Michael turned away slowly, signaling Joseph to follow him back to the boat. They had done their part. The lion was safe for now. As they made their way back to the boat, Michael's thoughts raced. What had just happened? Was it possible that the lion understood the help it had been given? And what did that handshake mean? He couldn't answer those questions, but the memory of it stayed with him, haunting him long after they had left the sandbar behind. In the days that followed, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had taken place. He continued to monitor the lion's recovery, using tracking devices to keep tabs on its movements. To his relief, the lion remained with its pride, but at a distance, seemingly giving its leg time to heal before rejoining the demanding life of the group. The incident was kept relatively quiet at first, but word eventually spread among the wildlife management team. Michael, Joseph, and Dr. Mwasa all agreed that the event should be documented for future studies. They had no idea how rare and remarkable it was to witness such behavior from a wild animal. 10 days later, Michael was reviewing camera trap footage when they spotted the lion on a recording. It was walking with ease, no longer limping, and appearing to have fully recovered. It was a relief to see that the treatment had worked. But what truly astounded them all was what happened next. The lion had returned. He was with his coalition partner, looking stronger than ever. And then, as they watched through binoculars, the lion did something unexpected once again. He offered them a kill. He stepped away from a fresh impala carcass, allowing his pride members to approach and feed first. It was clear. The bond between Michael and the lion was more than a simple rescue. Something had shifted between them, something that transcended the predator-prey relationship. That handshake, that moment of connection, it wasn't just an anomaly. It was a reminder that sometimes, in the wild, in the face of vulnerability and need, we can form bonds that go beyond our understanding. Some connections, as inexplicable as they may seem, transcend the boundaries we place between us and the animal kingdom. And those moments are the ones that stay with us forever.